Hi, friends. This is a sermon called Close Enough to Smell, and it is based on John chapter 11, verses 1 to 45, and Ezekiel chapter 37, 1 to 14. It's being preached at Yellowknife United Church on the fifth Sunday of Lent, March 22nd, 2026. What's your favorite smell? Mine's almond extract. Also, the smell of libraries, my grandmother's Camay classic soap, and my grandfather's pipe tobacco. My son loves the smell of the TTC subway, diesel and steel. Maybe your favorite is one of the classics, fresh bread, apple crisp, the first snowfall. What about your least favorite? Skunk spray? Rotten milk? I'm an embalmer, so I have a pretty high tolerance for gross things and also formaldehyde, but I cannot abide the smell of the olive cart in the grocery store. Smells carry stories. I love the smell of chlorine because swimming pools are my happy place. But for someone who's afraid of water, that same smell brings anxiety. Car buffs rave about new car smell, but it reminds me of getting carsick as a child. My husband, Derek, hates the smell of popcorn after 7 years working behind the snack bar of a movie theater. And many equate the smell of hospitals with their loved one being sick or maybe even dying. My parents' church smells like home to me. Old candle wax, furniture polish, generations of stale perfume. But for someone who has been hurt by the church, maybe those smells or the smell of incense might be very painful. Smells are like that. We can't avoid them by shutting our eyes or covering our ears. Smells tell us where we are, but also where we've been and what we've loved and what we've lost. When families used to come to the funeral home to make arrangements, we would bake fresh cookies for them. This is a trade secret. Warm cookies and coffee help a place feel homey. But of course, there was another reason. Funeral homes don't always smell good. Death has a smell, you see. Flowers, especially too many lilies, have a smell, the cloying smells of grief and loss. So we bake cookies and we brew coffee and we try to make death smell just a little bit less like death. Which makes it even more surprising that when Jesus arrives at the tomb of Lazarus, he doesn't cover the smell or run away from it. His friend has been dead for 4 days, and it's hot outside. Emotions are running high. Mary and Martha, the two sisters of Lazarus, take it in turns to both warn Jesus and admonish him. Lord, there is a stench, Martha says accusingly. First Martha, then Mary scold Jesus. If you had been here, he would not have died. Why didn't you come sooner? And it's true that they asked him to come and he did not. When the message reached Jesus that his friend Lazarus, whom he loved, we are told, was sick, he waited 2 entire days before making the journey to Bethany. And it makes us think perhaps that maybe Jesus wasn't a very good friend. Why not jump up and go right away? That's what I want to know. Maybe he had something to prove, or maybe he knew that there was nothing he could do to save his friend, or maybe he was just plain scared to go to Bethany, barely 2 miles from Jerusalem, a city full of religious leaders plotting to kill him. But Lazarus died, and now it's been 4 days, and his friends are weeping, and there is a stench. Listen, I have been there when graves are dug up, when old graves are dug up, and when caskets are pried open after many years. Death is not pretty, and while our bodies are amazing, they turn colors and ooze fluids and release gases, and none of it looks or smells very nice. 4 days. No one is expecting Jesus to get so close. Mary, Martha, all of them are saying, don't open that, leave it sealed, don't go in there. The tension, to say nothing of the smell, is thick enough to cut with a knife. And the crowd is muttering the same questions as Mary and Martha. Couldn't Jesus have saved him? As they inch closer to the tomb and the smell fills the air, all the evidence is that it is way too late. Death has already done its worst. Jesus knows all too well what a tomb is, and he knows where this road to Jerusalem is leading him. And maybe the smell hits him and makes his eyes water, or maybe he's just overcome with the grief of losing his friend, or maybe coming face to face, nose to nose, with Lazarus' body brings Jesus' own mortality sharply into focus. Maybe it's all of that. Grief, Whether latent or anticipatory is a tsunami. We know this. And here we have the shortest verse of all of Scripture, an epic novel in just 2 words. Jesus wept. From one cemetery to another, this week's scriptures are a funeral director's smorgasbord. Ezekiel takes us even deeper, away from the smells of fresh decay to a valley of dry bones, old bones, scattered and disconnected from one another and very, very dry. They don't have any marrow left in them. They are bleached white from the hot desert sun. They tell the story of a tragedy because Jews bury their dead very quickly, and these bones have been left out for ages and ages. It is the final indignity of the exile that these bones, the victims of some rampant Babylonian defeat, these bones left in a strange land cannot rest with their ancestors. These poor, lovely, lonely bones. Now, bones are strong. Of all the parts of our bodies, bones last the longest, even for centuries, even after cremation. It is the fragments of bones that remain when all else is gone. Bones carry the stories of our injuries and our strain and our survival. My mom used to tell me about the bone library back when she was a physiotherapy student. She would sign out bones and take them home to study. And as a kid, hearing those stories, I always thought that was very strange. Quite apart from the image of my mom sitting on a Kingston Transit bus carrying a human femur, a bone doesn't really do anything. It doesn't move or bend on its own. What is there to learn from holding a bone that you can't get from a picture or a model? But actually, bones can tell us so much. Just read any Temperance Brennan novel by Kathy Reichs, or watch any of the million forensic shows that are on TV. Bones carry the records of our lives. Forensic anthropologists use bones to determine the diets and illnesses and habits of civilizations. And in the Talmud, some rabbis suggest that on our bones are etched all of our iniquities, everything we have ever done, everything that we are, all that we survive and endure. It is all written on our bones. Imagine that. Our bones tell our stories. Once at the funeral home, we cared for a lady who had been alone in her home for a very long time before she was found. So long, in fact, that what we received was mostly bones. And it was the first time I had encountered bones like that, not in a textbook diagram, but in a person with a life and a story to tell. And I remember being unsettled by their dryness, their color, their sharpness. And yet we cared for her in the same way that we would care for anyone. We handled her gently and we dressed her as best we could. And I remember washing her blanket, the one she came with, and then wrapping her back up in it. And I was moved by the dignity of it all because this person, she was not just bones. Here was someone's daughter. Here was a child of God. And her body had a story to tell that was worthy of hearing. I never heard Ezekiel's words quite the same after that day, because this valley of dry bones are not just bones, of course. Even as dusty and scattered and dried out as they are not beyond hope. Here are people. Here are God's children, lives lived and stories carried. And into this valley of dusty grief, God asks Ezekiel a question. Can these bones live? And we want to say no, of course not. What a ridiculous notion. Because we have been those bones, right? There is so much that we feel, grief and anguish and illness and loss and desperation and yearning, matters of the heart or the mind. So much that we feel that enters our bodies and weighs us down. Spiritual pain, it's physical, isn't it? Hopelessness is not an abstract concept known only to some detached, otherworldly soul. It gets in our bones. It is dusty and dry and it wears us out. We know this. That when we are grieving, we stop wanting to eat. Or when we are depressed, our limbs grow heavy. We watch the news and we find we have a headache. We read about Iran and our stomach clenches. We fear for the world. and our shoulders burn from carrying it all. When we are in psychic pain, it makes us tired and sleepy, or it sets our nerves on fire and we fear we might never sleep again. Our bodies and our souls are not so separate after all. We have clenched our bones in response to what we feel. We have been dusty and dry bones, devoid of marrow, bleached from the sun. Our bones carry the scars of all we endure. And we have asked ourselves that very question. Is it possible that these bones could live? Could God still reach me, even in this place? Ezekiel does as he is told, and then, amazingly, something begins to happen. First, sinew, tendons, nerves, ligaments, bones join to bones, and skin grows to cover them, and what was scattered is now gathered, and what was dry is now animated with wet and luscious life, and what was disconnected gets knitted back together. And as Ezekiel continues to dream, God breathes. Channeling the four winds, God blows spirit and life into this sinewy, bony structure, the final piece of this 206-piece skeleton puzzle. And the bones live. Because you see, here are the people who were in exile, and God has made them a promise. You will find your way home. This mercy will be yours, even if I have to put you back together myself. There is no valley so dry that God cannot bring new life into being there. And no amount of scattering is beyond God's reach. No place on earth that God has forgotten, no matter what. Which is good news for us, because not only have we been in the valley of dry bones, but we have also been wrapped up in Lazarus' grave clothes. There are so many things that bind us, and we don't know if we can ever come out of the tombs. We wonder, too, what we must smell like when we feel the way we feel sometimes, when life is ugly and putrid, and we don't want anyone to get too close lest they see how we really are. When worry overtakes us, when there is never enough money, when our children won't listen, when our spouses seem angry all the time, when our parents are in hospital, the rent is overdue, food prices have gone up again, medication has side effects, we can't stop missing our ex, we fail our exams, our boss is a tyrant, when our siblings won't speak to us, when we feel like we can just never get ahead, never catch a break, no matter how hard we try. We all have grave clothes, and we've been wearing them a long time, and they stink. Jesus approaches the grave. He's right there, close enough to feel it, close enough to smell it. And God has taken on flesh, and this, right here, this is what the incarnation means. It means that Jesus has a full sensory experience, a front row seat to the worst things that happen to us as human beings. That he can smell and taste and see what it is to be fully human and fully alive, and that he weeps as we weep. And then, standing where no one wants to stand, just days before his own death, Jesus orders the tomb open. And after 4 days, the smell is so strong that it threatens to knock him over. But Jesus stays on his feet and calls to his friend, Lazarus, come out. And out he comes. Lazarus, comically hopping, for he is still bound up. His feet are bound, like someone with his shoelaces tied together, and he stumbles because the grave clothes are still on his face. And then his sisters are there, and they're laughing, and his friend Jesus is there to catch him and bring him back to life. Unbind him and let him go, commands Jesus, because it takes more than one person to make resurrection real. It takes a community of witnesses and helpers to nurture it and care for it and make it live. And here's the funny thing. We don't actually know what happens to Lazarus after this story is over. We know that the next night they all have dinner. And then we know that the authorities in Jerusalem are so angry that Jesus has done this last unbelievable sign in John's gospel. So angry that they decide to kill him. kill Jesus, and there is a plot to kill Lazarus as well. We forget that sometimes, this plot to kill Lazarus, and it probably was successful. We don't know, actually. We never hear the ending of that story. But in this moment, this singular, joyful, smelly moment, Lazarus is alive, and he has come out. And hope had died, and now it is alive. And in the unbinding of these grave clothes, in the willingness to see and smell and touch those things that had been dead and now are not, we unbind ourselves from hopelessness. Because you see, in God, hope cannot die. No matter how great the scepter of decay that looms, hope lives as long as we live. We spend so much of our lives trying to soften the harsh edges, the difficult things. We bake cookies and we light candles and we choose the right words, trying to make death smell less like death. But Jesus doesn't do any of those things. Jesus walks right towards the tomb, and he stands in the place that we would rather avoid, and he weeps, and he calls life out of it. He calls life out of us. God brings new life to every place. When we fall apart, God knits us back together. When our bones dry out, God is there with sinew and muscle. Resurrection is raw and smelly and deeply, deeply human. Hope is a thing with tendons and ligaments, and it is so strong that it can bear all our weight, even with the world on our shoulders. This is God's insistent, persistent hope, which is stronger than fear and more powerful than death. And it breathes life into our dry bones. It bids us come out. It unbinds our grave clothes, and it leads us home. May it be so, my friends. Amen.